George Cevora. So George is a good friend of mine since we worked together on his PhD in computational neuroscience in Cambridge, which concerned the role of prediction error in probabilistic associative learning. After his PhD, George moved into industry, where he's been applying machine learning to domains that range from jet engines to bacterial populations. He also has developed ROSA, which is a system for fighting bias and discrimination in AI. George is now Chief Data Scientist at Arca Blanca, where he leads a team of data scientists performing applied research within the field of AI for some of the largest companies in the UK. So thank you, George, for agreeing to talk to us, and he will be talking about adversarial examples, instability in deep learning, or vision in general. George.
Hello, thank you for the introduction, Rick. I hope you can all see my screen now. So the topic that I will be talking about today is instability in deep learning, and I think the best thing to start with is actually talking about what I mean by that, which is I'm talking about small changes of input that cause very large changes to the output. And it applies in general to any classifier, but it is most studied within machine vision and is most studied as so-called adversarial examples. So what adversarial example is the example on the bottom, for instance, where we have an original image of a pig, and then there is a very faint picture of that thing that looks like noise, 0.005 times that, so very, very faint, superimposed onto the big picture, and immediately it makes the machine vision system to misclassify the image as an airliner. Machine vision is currently dominated by deep learning, and that is the reason why we are talking about instability in deep learning, right? But in my talk here, I will be arguing that this is not about deep learning, that this is perhaps about how visual world works in general. Now, as I said, adversarial examples are tiny but very carefully crafted examples that confuse the AI system. And they are so difficult to find that you usually need to use another AI system to find them. And despite that they are very, very hard to find, they almost always exist. And what is very important, and please keep this in mind, is that this is unavoidable if the system is to be accurate. So the system that makes these strange mistakes to us is a system that is more accurate than a system that wouldn't make these mistakes. So stability is going contrary to accuracy in machine vision. Now, I would like to share this study with you, which is slightly tangential to the point of my talk, but I think you will find it as fascinating as I do find it. What these people has found is that these features, these noise-like strange patterns that make no sense to us, that they are actually statistically significant features of the stimuli. So it perhaps is, and this might be stretching it too far, but it perhaps is the case that our visual system is just unable to see the patterns in this, and the computer is actually right at classifying the pig as an airline. Now, why does this all matter? It matters because it works in the physical world as well. So you can obtain objects, and those objects, when you walk around the streets with them, they will get recognized by machine vision systems as something very different than they should be, or at least that we humans think they should be. In the case of the turtle, this is a 3D printed turtle with a special texture, and it gets consistently classified as a rifle by machine vision systems. Now, can you imagine what havoc would it cause if you took this turtle and were walking around Tube in London with it? It would just wreak massive havoc. And also, very importantly, it will make all the systems that are trying to prevent people running with guns around the Tube completely obsolete because there would be so many false alarms that they would lose relevance. The other example that I have here is a stop sign that has been modified in a very small way, but is consistently misclassified as a speed limit. And again, can you imagine the consequences if a self-driving car drives past a stop sign and instead of stopping only slows down to 30 miles an hour? That could be a lot of trouble. And they are really trouble because they are impossible to detect by humans, because we see that turtle as a turtle and we see the stop sign as a stop sign, and we would have never thought that it can lead to something as strange as the misclassification that I was talking about. And hostile actors can exploit it. It is already happening and it is becoming a real problem. Now, attempts at fixing this issue lead to just kind of a nonsensical arms race, not to actual solutions. And lastly, I would like to say that existence of these adversarial examples seriously undermines public trust in AI. And I think that is a shame because there are very many useful applications that can really improve human lives. But a lot of the time we get bogged down in discussions about this one specific crazy example that is super unlikely, but we can't explain it, so it casts the whole system in doubt. The past research in this field on the left-hand side assigns the existence of adversarial examples to the underlying uncertainty in classification in deep neural networks. The research paper on the right-hand side argues that it is a necessary feature of all rectified linear unit-based deep convolutional neural networks, whatever that is. It is the most common type of machine vision system. So these are the two premises that we start from, but I will actually be arguing for something much more general. I will be arguing for the existence of adversarial examples being a feature of how we understand the visual world. So how do we understand it? We understand visual world as semantic features, semantic concepts such as dog, and these features are translationally invariant, and this is a very important term here. What it means is that wherever in a picture you have a dog, it is still a dog. If it's upside down, it is still a dog, which is not the case for the rest of the visual system necessarily. Then we have visual features, which are edges, corners, spots, things like that. And the visual features kind of really render the semantic concept through angle, lighting, and general physics onto our retinas as an image. Visual features are also translationally invariant. The corner is a corner wherever it is in the image. But the image itself has specific locations, and it is a very important aspect of a visual image, whether we are talking about machine vision or human vision. Now, how does object recognition work in AI and in animals? Well, in AI, we know pretty well because we've designed those systems. It is about hierarchical abstraction of features, compound features, more complex features, all the way to semantic concepts. In humans, this is one of the most studied fields of neuroscience, and we understand it in a very similar way. We understand human visual system as a collection of pattern detectors and the compound to build higher order features in a hierarchical fashion. Then the last image that I have on the right-hand side, this is a now classical study by Güçlü. What they've shown is that the more kind of later areas of visual processing in human brain tend to correlate in activation most with the later higher level areas, higher level layers in deep neural networks, and conversely the lower level layer, sorry, it's very difficult to pronounce. The lower level layers do correspond best with the early visual areas. So it seems like we are solving the problem as animals in a very similar way that we design the neural networks to solve. Now, to start my argument, I will start talking about the mathematical properties of the different representational spaces that we are dealing with. We have extremely high dimensional continuous space of the image, because each pixel can be treated as individual dimension. In the case of ResNet 50, which is a gold standard machine vision system, we have 224 by 224 pixels times 3 channels RGB, and that results in 150,528 dimensions. That is a lot of dimensions. Then we have visual features. And in visual features, we have lower dimensional continuous space. In the case of ResNet 50, it's 7 by 7 pixels, which is 49 pixels. That is a lot of dimensions for me, but it is far less than the 150,000 that we've seen on the previous slide. And this, unlike the previous, the image space, this is translationally invariant. So wherever in the image it is present, it is present. Lastly, we have categorical space of semantic features, which in case of ResNet 50 is 1,000 categories. This is very different to the spaces that we were dealing with before. So how do we model this sort of problem? How do we study it? We've designed the simplest possible way that we can think of doing this, which is that we use high dimensional images of 3 black and white pixels, which is very convenient because 3-dimensional space is something that we can actually project, imagine, and reason about pretty well as humans. We have visual features that we only use 2 features with 2 pixels, and they are translation invariant. So we are looking for these features in the image of 3 pixels. And then we have 2 semantic categories only. And now what do we find? What we find is the boundaries of the semantic features projected into the image space. So now we have 3 pixels, that's 3 axes on these plots. We have 2 different semantic features, that's one on the left and one on the right. The boundaries between these features, as long as we are dealing with a higher dimensionality in the image than in the visual features, and as long as the semantic features and visual features are translationally invariant, what we are finding consistently is that however we formulate the problem, those boundaries are always very complex and don't make much sense. So in this case, these 2 volumes actually slot into each other and create the boundary between 2 semantic concepts in respect to the visual space. The next most important thing that we find is that while we do consistently find instability, but it is extremely unlikely actually to find it. It's very hard, and it is because the areas of instability have lower dimensionality than the image itself. And in this specific example that I just sketched on the slide, I'm demonstrating an image with 2 pixels, and the image is a specific location in the 2D space. Now, if you have a region of instability that is 2-dimensional, as a square that I drafted on the left-hand side, that is reasonable to find. But if the region of instability is only 1-dimensional, a line, as I've drawn on the right-hand side, that is very, very difficult to actually hit, and basically impossible to arrive at just by chance. Now, this leads me to my conclusions. The first one is that instability is a feature of the visual world, pending formal proofs that it actually always has to be the case. We're consistently finding it, but we haven't yet proven that it can't happen any other way. And the necessary conditions for that seem to be high dimensionality of the input, categorical representations in semantics, lower dimensionality of the features, and translation invariance. We also found that it is very improbable to arrive at instability just by chance. It's very difficult to find. And this is the reason, and I'm now postulating, that we do not see the instability with humans so much. Because you can't query human visual systems enough times to actually find a point of instability. And this brings me also to the solution, which is that while we can't really make a machine vision system that would not be unstable, if we do not allow people to query our machine vision system at high throughput, they won't be able to find the regions of instability just because they are so rare. And now I would just like to thank you for your attention, and Ole Turnbull, who had a major contribution to this work, as well as the rest of my lab. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, George. Yes, just as usual, we would invite questions in the Q&A box. And there's one question there already. How are semantic features translated in a Euclidean space?
They are projected into Euclidean space by using of the visual features. And the visual features are, let's say, configured by what is the visual setting of the specific scene.
Okay, and Thomas asks, isn't one of the possible explanations of some of the vulnerabilities to adversarial attacks in machine learning vision sometimes focus too much on the texture and too little on the shape?
I think that texture is in some sense a shape on just a lower level. I would argue that there has been way too much focus on texture in the adversarial examples that we have seen so far. Specifically, that turtle, I mean, is solely focused on texture, but there is more and more of them also focused on shape. And I think that the reason why we don't see as many of them is because fundamentally the lowest level features, which is the texture, they are the easier to perturb, to modify.
Thank you. If I may ask a question, so I understood your argument that these regions of instability are very hard to find in practice, but I didn't quite follow the last conclusion that that they don't exist so much in human vision because I mean, in theory they could, couldn't they?
I think they could. I think they could exist in human vision. I would actually guess that they do, but I just think that given how improbable they are, I wouldn't expect to encounter them in my lifetime, really.
So you're not saying that the vision system works differently from these deep convolutional nets?
I think it definitely works different in very many ways, but I think that what we see is that these fundamental principles that cause instability are also what we know about the human visual system. So I would expect to find instability in the human visual system as well.
And what did you mean by solving this problem in artificial systems by throttling back? I didn't quite catch what you meant.
Okay, sorry, that might be my too much focus on deploying AI systems. So the way how these things usually get deployed is that they will be set up as an API, and anyone can send an image for classification. Now, if you allow that, and if you allow someone to query your system 100 million times, they will probably be able to find where the instability lies, and they will be able to design a particular stimulus that will completely confuse the machine vision system. If you impose limits on how many kind of classification tasks a user have done, then you should be able to very quickly stop them from being able to achieve that. And unfortunately, one of the things also is that it may require that the full detail of a machine vision system is not published, unfortunately, specifically in terms of the data. Because the same machine vision system with trained on different data sets will have instabilities in different areas. But if you share both all of your code and all of your data, then I'm afraid that you are giving out the key to find instability for possible hostile actors.
Okay, we've got some sort of follow-on questions coming into the Q&A. So Folko asks, would you consider optical illusions as instabilities of the human visual system?
Sorry, would I consider what?
Optical illusions.
Optical illusions. Yeah, I was thinking about it for quite a long time. And the easy answer is no, because there are generally very large changes to the visual input. Now, yeah, because you completely change like everything. So in that sense, it's not instability. On the other hand, we are talking about hierarchies of features, and maybe something that is very large change on very low level is very small change on high level. But that is really difficult topic to tackle. So I would prefer to answer no, they are not.
Thank you. And a final question, going back to an earlier one about semantic features in a Euclidean space. If semantic features are translated into Euclidean space by splitting up the object into specific visual features, does this pose the thing is the sum of its parts assumption in object recognition?
Is that an object is sum of its parts in machine vision, but it is to a large degree based on that hierarchical abstraction of features and a translational invariant, so they can be in different locations, and the whole thing is a bit of a soft logic, really, I would say. And I would believe that human vision probably works in quite similar sense in that respect. And basically, to really think about what I find helpful when I think about the projection of the semantic categories into visual space is that when you just look at it, it looks like it's random. It's essentially, if you are not using the visual features to identify those objects and to translate to semantic categories, when you just look at it in sort of linear computing fashion, there is no regularity, no rules, essentially.
Great, thank you.